You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the criss-crossing.com, the criss-crossing.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a man who likes to read books through osmosis. I'm your host, Chris Voss. Welcome to the show, folks. It's wonderful to have you and be a part of the big family. Isn't it nice to sit down with the Chris Voss Show family and feel the warmth, the love, part of that whole community of the Chris Voss Show? We certainly appreciate you guys coming by. I can never say that enough because I mean it. I mean it from the depth of my heart. I'm lonely and I have nothing better to do all day than just spend time with you guys on a podcast and bring you brilliant minds. One of them is not mine on the show. That's why we have guests, so we can have the smart people on the show. Today we have an amazing guest, and she's going to be talking about this amazing portion of history. You're going to learn a lot because the important thing about history is the one thing man does not learn, one thing man can learn from his history is that man does not learn from his history, or something to that effect that I always say. In the meantime, as always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Put your arm around them, hold their phone, and force them to subscribe to the Chris Voss Show. Don't force them. That's just a joke, people. But tell them to go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn /Chris Voss, all the Chris Voss properties on LinkedIn. There's a whole mess of them. She is the author of the newest book that came out January 17th, 2023, Master, Slave, Husband, Wife, An Epic Journey from Slavery to Freedom. Ilyan Wu is on the show with us today. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. And give us your .coms wherever people would find you on the interwebs, please.
Sure. It's ilyanwoo.com. That's ILYONWOO.com.
There you go. And so what motivated you want to write this book?
Well, simply put, William and Ellen Craft. They came out with a story, a narrative in 1860. And this was a signed reading for a seminar that I was taking at Columbia University on the literature of passing. Mm-hmm. And, it's one of those reading experiences that just stays with you, that, I can remember the moment of being in the library. And I remember, of course, the adventure, the great escape. But I also it's the voice that sat with me all this time. And this voice was telling me things I had never heard before, and I was ready to follow it anywhere.
So who were these folks? The title of the book, Master, Slave, Husband, and Wife, and a Journey, I believe, where they escaped slavery. Who are these folks?
Yes. Well, the folks are Ellen Craft and William Craft. They are an enslaved couple from Macon, Georgia. And Ellen is the daughter of an enslaved woman named Maria, and her first enslaver. So her first enslaver was also her father. And from him, she inherited a very light complexion. And when she decided, along with her husband, to make this escape from slavery, she used that complexion, her ability to pass for white, as part of her disguise. So when we're talking about master slave in the title, we're talking about Ellen impersonating a master and William playing the role of her slave. So she dresses herself as a rich, wealthy, white man and a disabled man who would all the more need the services of her slave. And that is a role performed by William.
Oh, wow. And they use this getup, for lack of a better word, to escape the South?
Yes. So, as an enslaved couple, their movement is completely curtailed, right? All the bridges are watched. They can only travel with a written pass from their enslavers. And so there's really no good way for them to be able to leave Macon. They have no autonomy. And what they do is they use this ingenious disguise so that they can get on a train in Macon, Georgia, and take that train for over 1,000 miles to freedom.
Wow. So they have to go through all sorts of different mechanisms and checkpoints, basically. Back then, there was all sorts of, I mean, technically the police were started in America to be slave police, where they would, they would capture escaped slaves and return them to their places. At least that's my understanding. And so they had to, deal with all this as they go through. And it sounds like a really amazing, brilliant disguise.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when Ellen first puts on this disguise, they're hiding in the cabin that she inhabits behind her enslaver's home. They are in this cabin. It's 4 a.m. She puts on her shirt. She puts on her vest. She puts on these pants that she's actually made, the jacket. She's dressed up from shoes to hat. And William has just cut her hair. And then she stands back for a moment, and he basically says, "You make a great gentleman. You look like a gentleman." And yeah.
And this is an incredible risk that they're taking, because if they're found out, if they're caught, if they're returned to their to whoever their slaveholder is, the penalties can be grievous.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so when William has to go to the train station, he passes right by the court square where he's seen people captured, failed escapees. He's seen them, just in chains and brutalized. And in that same square, actually, he himself had been auctioned as a child. So there are all these dangers. There's physical punishment, there's separation from each other, there's being sold, and there are also dangers to those they leave behind.
Wow. And that can make all the difference. Did they have kids they left behind or anything, or was it just the two of them?
They don't report on having had any children. And they don't seem to have had any children during this time, although there are accounts that suggest that Ellen may have had a child when she was in slavery. And of course, that can't be corroborated, and the Crafts themselves don't speak of having had any children in slavery, but it's one of the things that I explored in my research in this book.
Wow. And so how hard was it to dig into depth, find the journey? Did they keep a journal? What was how hard was it to go through some of this research?
It was difficult, but it was also made much easier by the fact that they themselves were storytellers. So they wrote a narrative, as I mentioned, but they also spoke their story all the way across New England. So once they get out of bondage in the South and they land in the North, at that point they could have gone to Canada. They could have changed their names and kind of quietly disappeared and started new lives in a safer place. But they don't do that. They tell their story all the way across the North, and newspapers are following their story.
Wow.
And reporting on this. So we have a lot more from them, with the combined reporting and with their own narrative than in many such cases. And at the same time, there was much that they didn't tell. They either couldn't or wouldn't tell.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And so they kind of become almost like little celebrities, having escaped from, they do this in 1948. They go from Georgia to the North, and then, something happens in 1850.
Well, the story does feel very present, so I can understand getting some of those dates mixed up. Yes. In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 passes. So there has been a Fugitive Slave Act before this, but Southerners are really upset that there is not really any accountability there, that it's too hard to actually enforce it. But in 1850, a powerful new Fugitive Slave Act passes. And this one, scholar Ibram Kendi calls it as something having octopus powers. And it enables enslavers like the Crafts to reach over into states and be empowered as never before to re-enslave these people just based on eyewitness testimony. So the Crafts have no ability to testify or to fight back. If somebody claims them as their slaves, there's nothing that they can do. And the enslavers can go straight, they can bypass state and local officials, and they can appeal to federally appointed commissioners. Not only that, but any ordinary citizen, it's said that every good citizen is required, if called upon, to essentially become part of the slave hunting team. They can raise a posse, and if you're called upon, you have to go, and you have to go help recapture these people or face prison and exorbitant fines, really high fines.
Hi, folks. Here's Voss here with a little station break. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We'll resume here in a second. I'd like to invite you to come to my coaching, speaking, and training courses website. You can also see our new podcast over there at criss-crossing.com. Over there, you can find all the different stuff that we do for speaking engagements if you'd like to hire me, training courses that we offer, and coaching for leadership, management, entrepreneurism, podcasting, corporate stuff. With over 35 years of experience in business and running companies as CEO, I think I can offer a wonderful breadth of information and knowledge to you, or anyone that you want to invite me to for your company. Thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you listening to the show, and be sure to check out chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Now back to the show. Wow, and it like forces citizens to go be bounty hunters to find these folks?
It does. And in fact, if you do the opposite, if you try to help these people, you also face incredible punishment, prison, and a lot of money.
So they escape 1,000 miles to the north. Mm-hmm. They get away. They end up in, I guess, New England.
Yes.
And then this new Fugitive Slave Act comes out in 1850, and they've got to escape again. Where did they go from there?
Well, at that point, it's no longer safe to be in the United States of America. It's not been enough to escape the South.
I'm not sure it still is. For anybody, including me. No, that's a joke.
Yeah. Well, I've got family in the South too, but so we won't speak ill of the South. But I think
I'm just talking about America in general. I might go to Canada, better health insurance up there. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk of Canada. There has been over the last couple of years as well. Yeah. But so when they arrive in the North, it's not like they're suddenly free. They don't suddenly cross this magical line and then, the chains are broken. They are still legally enslaved in the North. And I think that's one of the things that really interested me in the writing of the book and the pursuit of this history is that, we have a tendency to divide ourselves and say, all right, this is South, this is North. But we were really one nation at that time, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And so, especially with the passage of this law that was part of the Compromise of 1850 and meant to kind of unify us and save the Union, mm-hmm. everybody was implicated. Everyone was.
And this is kind of interesting. This is the first time I've heard about the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. Abraham Lincoln doesn't take office till 1861. I'm wondering if this is one of the things that helped propel his presidency, because I'd be kind of pissed off. I'd be like, I don't want to go hunt people down. I got farming to do, and it's 1850. I got farming to do and kids to raise, and I got better things to do than get on a horse and go right around trying to find people. And for the slave trade, I don't really care about. But I suppose attitudes and opinions were different back then. But seriously, though, I wouldn't be forced to do something I don't want to do. I don't want to go. You got to join a thing, and we're going to go ride around on horses for a while. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. That doesn't sound like fun to me. I'll stay here at the farm and do stuff. But I think that's interesting because within 11 years, Abraham Lincoln takes the presidency, and then of course we take a turn at freeing slavery and different things. So this is really interesting, and so it says here on the book data, there's 3 epic journeys that that they go on. Do I have all 3 of them that we've kind of teased out?
Yes, the first one we could even talk about a bit more, because that's the one they really cover in their book. So the 3 epic journeys are, first they go from Macon, Georgia. They travel those 1,000 miles to Philadelphia. And then they're originally intending to go to Canada, but instead they go on this abolitionist lecture circuit tour for another 1,000+ miles. That was actually really interesting, where I mapped them, all over New England. I put little, pinpoints down on every place they stopped. And previously, I remember scholars saying, well, this really seems like a crazy route. They're going everywhere. They're zigzagging. Why are they doing this? William Wells Brown, who's this incredible self-emancipated person, but also a best-selling author and speaker who takes them on this journey. He's the one who's planning all this. And people are saying, well, Brown, what is he thinking? Going back and forth. But actually, if you plot those points, they're actually following the railroad tracks. So not only does the railroad help them go from Macon to Philadelphia, it helps them on their tour all over New England where they spread their story. And there's a real power of storytelling here that's going on. You say it is a real shift from 1848 to 1861, and self-emancipated people like William and Ellen Craft have a huge part in that, in transforming public opinion, because it's one thing when you're told, right, that these horrible things are happening to people. It's another when you're seeing somebody right in front of you who's experienced this. And for a lot of white audiences, it was especially shocking to see Ellen Craft because she looked white. So they were able to identify with her and be pulled into this anti-slavery cause as never before.
Yeah, and so they're helping spread the story of what's going on in the South and how it's going, and the horrors of what's going on down there. It's kind of like the same sort of thing that, like you said, they're seeing these people in person giving a witness testimony. It's kind of like the same sort of thing where, people weren't really into civil rights until they saw, the dogs and the hoses turned on people in Birmingham in the 60s, and people saw the horror of it and on TV, and that brought it home to people where they're like, well, this isn't right. And so I think it was extraordinary they did that. It's interesting the effect that this had before Abraham Lincoln, and maybe had some interest in getting him elected and changing this sort of stuff. Did they inspire other people to escape, or were they mostly able to just tell their story in the North? Imagine any sort of printing of their story was squashed in the South.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know of a specific example. I do know, though, that some people, including Frederick Douglass, were troubled by their telling their story in this much detail, and that once you have that escape method publicized, it prevents other people from actually doesn't prevent them from taking this route, but it enhances their danger. And that's exactly what happened with another self-emancipated man who fled bondage around the same time, Henry Box Brown. So he's a man who had himself mailed in a box, in a shipping container from Virginia all the way up to Philadelphia. He had himself nailed into this, and it was a brutal journey. And when he came out, and when the Crafts came out, and they actually take the stage together with Douglass. Douglass is saying, you're giving away this method. And around that time, there is actually another effort to escape by box, and these two people are caught. Wow.
It's extraordinary, the danger that you take. I mean, people don't really think about the empathy of it, of how much danger you're in, and to travel 1,000 miles. And we're not talking like you got in the car and you drive, and I don't know, 1,000 miles. What is that, like 20 hours or something? That must have took them quite a lot of time to travel from Georgia 1,000 miles out by foot or horse or rail. How did they? Did they walk it, or did they?
They must have walked pieces of it. Actually, later when they escape to Canada, they do have to walk 7 miles in the mud, and it's terrible. But that's another journey. That's a journey where sort of everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and they were much luckier on the first leg. But they started off by train. They also took a steamboat. In fact, the journey was supposed to be much shorter than it was. They were supposed to start in Macon and then take the train to Savannah, and then take a steamship to Charleston. And then from Charleston, there was another steamer that went straight to Philadelphia. The problem is, when they arrived in Charleston, it's wintertime. It's almost actually exactly 100. They might have been in Charleston on this day, 173 years ago. But anyway, they arrive in Charleston and they have one last leg to go, they think. And they're going to buy tickets that will take them all the way to the north. And then they learn that the ship has stopped running, that it's the winter season now. So they can't go that way. And not only that, but they learned that on the last journey out, there had been another man who had sealed himself in a box, going back to the box. And he was caught. The ship was stuck there for too long and he had to just make his way out of his box. And because of that, the port of Charleston was watched that much more carefully. So in a way, they were kind of relieved when they learned later, wow, that could have been really bad if we had tried to make our escape there and gotten caught. But instead of taking this one single ride to the north, now they have to go, it's called the overland route, and they're following basically the mails. And they have to travel with the mail, making all these different stops. And I mean, I can't even imagine stopping so many times. I have trouble just like transferring trains, like on the subway, and I'm like directionally very challenged. But they didn't have a map. They didn't have literacy. They had so many strikes against them, and yet they managed to figure it out.
Yeah, they didn't have GPS or any or maps or any of the forming. I mean, in the whole time you're kind of in a state of terror or heightened awareness where you've got to keep your act on that you're putting up so that you can maintain your disguise, and then you're probably walking a lot. And as you mentioned, maybe in winter or in the outdoors, like I say, you're not in the comfort of a vehicle or something most times. And, so it's a hell of a journey, and it takes time. How long did it take from the cover of that track? Was it a month or?
They left on December 20th and they arrived on Christmas Eve. Wow. But one thing I would add actually is that they did travel in style. That's what made this journey so different from many of the others that we hear about, is that they didn't have to, go through forests and walk for miles and miles on end. They actually took the best technology of their day. They rode it all. Ellen Craft, was in first class. She had pretty good seating, especially when she got to Virginia and Maryland, the trains improve. William was stuck in a different car, in what's called the Negro car, and he was stuck with the baggage. And at one point, actually, I mean, this story just has so many twists and turns. You really just can't make it up. And I'll just give you one example. It's like the last leg of their journey. They're almost to Philadelphia, and they stop at the Susquehanna River. And they don't know that there's this last change that they're going to make, but the train can't cross the water. The water flows, the ice flows are just too much. And so what happens is the passengers disembark and they take a ferry, but the luggage is shuttled over with the ferry as well. In the entire luggage cart. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but so William is with the luggage and he's fallen asleep because so many days have passed when they're running and they've had to plan the journey. They've stayed up to perfect their costume, everything. They've been on heightened alert day after day. And now they think we're almost to Philadelphia. And so he falls asleep, and he falls like dead asleep, and they roll over the whole luggage cart. He does not check on Ellen, and Ellen is terrified now because by this time he's just gone. He's sleeping, but she doesn't know this, and he's gone. And so she has to make this decision. What is she going to do? Is she going to travel on without him? Is she going to try to wait? She has the tickets. He does not. She has no money because they've just transferred it to him, actually, because they think they're so close that she's more likely to get robbed as a wealthy white man than he is.
Oh, wow.
She is so brave in this moment when she decides to move on.
Wow. And I guess I imagine they finally hook up and find each other. I guess otherwise the story would be a little different, I guess. Yeah, it would be tragic. But yes, exactly. He's sleeping, and when somebody actually wakes him up and they're like,
your master was scared stiff about losing you. He was sure that you'd run off. And William's thinking to himself, I don't think she thought that I was going to run off. And I think he actually says this. And it's one of the really ironic lines of the story, because he says things that are true. She would never think that I'd run off. That's actually true, but they don't believe him. They're like, no, she is just, or he, because they think she's a man. Mm-hmm. Your master is utterly terrified and thinks that you are fleeing.
Wow. That's crazy, man. Well, what do you hope people come away from reading the book and the story that's weaved in it?
That's a wonderful question. I hope that more people will know the crafts as the heroes that they were, as American heroes. There are people, the memory of the crafts has been cherished and kept, especially by their descendants who are still living today. And there are scholars who know their story, but they don't have the same kind of name recognition as, say, Douglas or even Henry Box Brown, who I previously mentioned. And I would like the world to know better their name.
There you go.
To understand them as the incredibly courageous American heroes that they were.
Yeah. And sharing their message and spreading it, even though it probably hurt others from coming, probably shined quite a light on what was going on with slavery and the issues that were present there, and just made it so that, maybe, hopefully it led to the, overthrowing of slavery, at least with what Lincoln tried to do. After that, of course, his assassination, they did the Jim Crow laws, but reverse course for the next 50, 100 years. It's just insane, the path of this country. But it's important we learn our history so that we know how to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. It's been really enlightening to have you on. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
There you go. And give us the .coms wherever you want people to find you on the interweb so people can get to know you better.
Sure. It's IlyonWoo, ILYONWOO.com.
There you go. Order the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. Master, Slave, Husband, Wife, An Epic Journey from Slavery to Freedom, out January 17th, 2023. Order up for the new year, and it'll be a great read set for the upcoming new year. The smarter you can be, the better you are. That should be a saying I should put on a shirt. Because the Chris Voss Show, the smarter you are, the better looking you are. Something, I don't know. Anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. Go see all of our properties on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all those crazy places. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time.